Hello, Tolkien geeks, and welcome back to Voice of Geekdom Live. I'm your host, Dan, and with me today is a good friend of mine, Mr. Chase Mullins from Los Angeles, USA. He's an actor friend. Some of you may know Chase as the voice of Eol and Myglin in my Silmarillion Explained series. So if he starts breaking out into received pronunciation, don't get creeped out. Actually, we might be talking about those characters a little bit in this stream because people have been talking about these two. So it's kind of fun. So yeah, it's great to have you on, Chase. You and I were at the premiere recently in London.
Correct.
Leicester Square. We were on the red carpet. Well, not on the red carpet, but to
technically
the side.
We were at the very end. So the whole deal was they put us in the fan pit, and as soon as it was over, we got marched through the red carpet. Just problem was they ushered us quite quickly because they were running behind. So, but we have photos on the red carpet.
Chris here is making a joke here that I was about to make later on. We'll get to that. Yeah, thank you all for coming out, and it's good to see you all here. We've got my moderator, Kate Batinsky, in the chat. We've got Council of the Rings, fellow YouTuber in here. Brief Mortal 11, good to see you. Alison, another one of my moderators. Hi, Alison. We've got Danny McKay. We've got Mr. or Mrs. or Miss APNPL. Don't mean to misgender you from that inscrutable username, but but good to see you. Chris, I've already shouted you out a little. Jamie, all right, Dan, love these live chats. We love you. Yeah, good to see everybody. So Chase, how are you feeling about the Rings of Power thus far? Because you've been interested in this show for a long time, and you've been following it pretty closely. When we were at the red carpet event, when the actors were going past, I was kind of asking you constantly who they all were because I didn't know a lot of the names. I mean, I knew a lot of the names, but I didn't know a lot of the kind of minor roles and who they were. And you've been following this pretty closely. You count yourself as a walking IMDb.com.
Yes, exactly. Although I was inaccurate at one point, I couldn't pick out Simon Merrill's at one point. I was like, who's that guy with the great hair and the powder blue suit? And then I was like, oh, right, it's him. But so far, I think the show is strong. I think after the premiere, I had felt, not to be the negative one, but I felt it was a little mixed. I had some issues. I think me coming from a film background, I'm less upset when the show strays away from the lore, and I'm more upset when the show strays away from the correct tone. You know what I mean? Like when things start to feel a bit contemporary or dialogue feels a bit jarring. Those are the things that seem to that bother me more than something like, okay, they're taking some liberties here. But overall, I think honestly, it feels like it's ramping up and getting better and better each episode. I think episode 3, we can all agree, was amazing. I loved that episode.
It was a stronger one, yeah. Opinions will vary, of course, but yeah, I think that was probably my favorite on balance overall. Although I did like this newest one with a few strong exceptions.
Yes, and that's kind of the issue I have with it, is that the lows are just as low as the highs, so it really does feel jarring because you're like, dang, you guys are so close to nailing this that when you miss, it feels that much bigger.
So the lore is obviously really, really important to me, as everyone knows, and so I do care about that too. The kind of fidelity to what's in the books is kind of important, but I look at it as kind of what is true to the themes and the kind of story that was trying to be told in the books, rather than every date and every name and everything being spot on. It's more about how do we tell this story in the right way that is true to Tolkien's themes and ideas. And so I think on a high level, like a lot of that stuff is not too bad. It's pretty good in a lot of ways.
For sure.
But when you do get down to the granular level of like characters and things like this, I think sometimes they've kind of not entirely understood a character in the same way that I might have expected them to. And so there are certain characters in particular that I I'm enjoying less than others, I would say.
Can you name Anyone in particular?
Gil-galad stood out in the first episode. I don't know whether I said
Yeah.
this to you after the premiere, because I don't know. We didn't really talk that much after the
No,
episode.
I was very quiet after the premiere because I didn't
Mhm,
want to. It was all so much. This is such a long time coming, and I have a very specific relationship to this show, which we'll save for another episode. If I'm a little
mhm.
too close to it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Um, and so it was hard for me just to make an opinion right away. What I will take away with and just say that when I left that first through this first two episodes, I just like the people who are making this love this world, and that made me feel good that it's in
Mhm.
the hands of people who truly do feel like they love Tolkien's work, and that's great. But tell me about Gil-galad. I would love to know what
Uh, the feeling I have about Gil-galad, or Gil-galad as he should be,
Gil-galad. Yeah,
his
right,
name
right.
should be pronounced. He I always felt that he was the one who was able to see things before they happened, and he was the one who
Mm,
was really aware that evil doesn't sleep, which was the line that they gave to Galadriel.
mhm,
I always felt that he was the one who was on top of things before anybody else, and who really led the charge against Sauron early, and saw Sauron's rise before it happened. And so they seem to have just moved that role onto Galadriel for us, and that's fine,
yeah.
but it does undermine the way that he feels as a character for me so far. And we haven't had that much of him,
Mhm.
and there is a stipulation which I know that you've got your finger raised to
Yeah,
make,
because I'm
because
yeah,
he does seem to have uh, some kind of precognition that he's making his decision based on.
correct. That was what I was
But
gonna say.
it does feel a little jarring at the moment. I'm going to give them time for him to have a season one arc that brings him back around to something like the character that I expect.
Right.
But I was bothered by that a little. I expect to see a lot more of him later on when we get to the Last Alliance, of
Yeah,
course.
we've
So
gotten so little of him this season so far, which
we
I
have.
assume is very purposeful. You know that they're trying to do it that way. But I know what you mean. And I'm just hoping. I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt that his line that really got me was the when he talks to Elrond, he says we both
Mm,
foresaw that like she may be the problem. Like her search for this thing actually will bring it about. Kind of very, very Shakespearean in that sense that we try to
mm,
go against the fates, and yet we just drive even faster towards them. And so I'm hoping that he knows something we don't, and is like, I need to get her out of here because maybe I can stop this thing from happening. But as
mhm.
we all know, we all know how this ends, and
Yeah.
not well for him.
Yeah, well, one theme in Tolkien is this idea of precognition and prescience about the future. Is
Mhm.
that if you try to preempt a prophecy of that kind, it will usually turn out badly for you. And
Mhm.
that's not just a theme in Tolkien, but it's
It's like
Macbeth, like
the
any
Greeks, everybody.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
any
Yeah.
number of literature throughout the ages.
Mhm.
It's been kind of like a almost like a narrative rule. Um, so yeah, I think they're building up towards an irony where he has tried to stop Galadriel from causing the rise of evil, and in doing so, he has caused her to cause the rise of evil. I think that's
Right.
the irony that they're leading us towards there, but
Mhm.
that's not in the books, and
Right.
it does jar a little.
Mhm.
Um, Also, we're getting a little bit of a one-note Galadriel as well so far, and a lot of people have commented on this, and opinions, excuse me,
Mhm.
opinions vary wildly on this character so far, and
Yeah.
I think some of the acting has been pretty strong, but it's also very. We seem to be stuck in this cycle with her, whereby she's doing stupid things, and people are pointing it out to her, and she's not quite learning. We get more of that in this episode with Halbrand, which we'll get to.
Correct. I was gonna actually address that because that's been one of my. I think I'm one of the outliers in that
Mm,
I enjoy her single-mindedness or her one-track mind only for the fact that and we can talk about this also too later. I don't want to go off on too many tangents, but her being an elf, someone
mhm,
where the rules of time are very different for you. And so for us as the audience, we're seeing this person go over the course of, let's say it's been what, a week since or a couple weeks since this, since the beginning of the show to now, that we're seeing her do the same things over and over again. But for her, this is a blink of, you know what I mean, in terms of the timeline of her life. This might as well be an hour of her being this angry, one-track mind person. But I enjoy that also because she has had nothing but pain and tragedy and all these terrible things that happened to her. And I'm trying to put myself in that position of, if everyone I ever loved was taken from me by this one thing, um, what would I turn into? And the thing is, you would just be like, this is all I care about, because if I give myself time to worry about anything else, I'll just fall apart. And so I agree that in this episode there is a moment, which we'll talk about, um, that was a little silly, where I was kind of like, all right, she's very blinded by this. But I also get the idea that we've got 5 seasons of this and she's got to go somewhere. She can't in the first 3 episodes become our Kate Blanchett, she's got to have room to get there, and I'll give them some leeway. Now, having said that, if we go this whole season and nothing changes, yeah, I'll jump on that bandwagon of being like, this is too much. But as of right now, I feel like, thanks to Morphe's performance, she's doing a great job of making me be like, I get it, you're really angry, and I'm okay to stay with you in this very singular you know place of anger for a little bit longer. But I'm hoping in the next 2 episodes we see some nuance and some shift.
Yeah, we'll see. Time will tell. Okay, so overall, how would you rate the episodes so far?
I would put this as my second favorite. I give it a 7.5 out of 10 if we're assigning numbers to these things. I thought episode 3 surpassed all my expectations in a way that was very surprising. So I had high hopes for this one, because I was like, all right, you guys have been set up for this beautiful thing to just take off. And the beginning of the episode, I was making this face the whole time, and looking to my wife who's watching with me like, what are they talking about? The elves taking our jobs thing. I'm a big apologist for this show when people are like, oh, it's going to be dealing with modern politics and this and that, and I'm like, relax. These people are writers, they know what they're doing. This was a moment that took me out of the show for a bit, because it felt too on the nose.
This was the first time that we really did get kind of like a little bit of modern politics kind of peeking its head above the writer's room. And yeah, it wasn't a great scene. And it was a shame that it was the first scene in the episode, more or less, right after the dream.
It was great that we washed the bad taste out of our mouth quite quickly after that, because it moved on, and I think it got better. I'm also, and I get it, look, this show was made during COVID times. It was hard to get a lot of extras on set. You're on an island in New Zealand, which you have a population limit there. But I felt like this episode, so many times we're in the same town square looking at the same 15 people, and not to knock the Numenorians, maybe this is a commentary on them about how just the masses are idiots, but they're angry about elves taking our jobs. And then Farazan shows up and is just like, Farazan shows up and he's just like, no guys, everything's fine. They're like, oh yeah, we're with you. And then Muriel shows up and is like, now we're gonna go to war. Oh yeah, now I'm all for that. So I'm like, man, these guys are swayed very easily. And it's like the same 20 dudes that just represent this entire town in the same, it just, yeah, that to me was just kind of like, why does this feel so, I don't know, maybe too easy? I don't know what the right word is, and I don't want to just be overly critical for, I get it, they were dealing with some serious limitations, but those were 2 things about the episode that for me were jarring.
Yeah, the swaying of opinion like that was a bit Monty Python. We were actually joking about that in the group chat earlier today that we have for the Tolkien creators and YouTubers, and it was funny because I and James Talbot, when we broke that a scene down in the aftermath of that scene being teased in one of the trailers, we made the same joke back then as well, that it looked a bit Monty Python, and that was just from like a second of footage.
Right.
But we ran with it and made the joke, and it kind of did play out like that a little.
It did. And that's the one time where the speculation about something negative about the show has, for me, turned out to be true, because most of the other things people have been like, oh, I hate this based on one photo, and I'm like, pump the brakes, Chief. Like, let's see it play out. And so far, 9 times out of 10, I feel like for me, when that scene or moment is played out, it's been lovely. It's been great.
Mm.
So yeah. So look, I mean, we got 8 episodes. We have 5 seasons. I'm willing to give some slip ups here and there.
Council of the Rings. Hi there. He says, I was a bit baffled with the women just standing with wine all day. Kate says, actually, that's probably the most relatable part.
That's great. Yeah. Well, by choice, standing with wine by choice is totally relatable. But if someone's like, here, hold this wine, you're standing here for 12 hours, you're the wine carrier. Yeah. It it yeah. How do it makes me wonder what the people in Numenor do all day. These guys are like, we're in the the blacksmiths of the Builders Guild or whatever. I'm like, guys sure do a lot of drinking. Also, no, if one more character says drinks on me, and then a round of drinks show up, in Numenor, I'm gonna be like, this is ridiculous. This is the second time we've seen it. 2 episodes in a row, someone has been like, drinks on me. So if that's just the thing with Numenorians, is you got to get them drunk, and then you can do whatever you want with them. It just it's it's just a little too easy.
That's Sauron's like ploy when he gets there later on,
Yeah.
or unless he's already there. Is just get everybody drunk. He doesn't
Right.
need to use his silver tongue at all. It's just.
And if it works, then you know what? Maybe he's right. Maybe he's onto something, and maybe he needs to be in charge.
Yeah. Okay. What did you? So let's start with the first scene. What did you think of that gorgeous dream sequence at the beginning? Because that was the very first scene,
Oh,
and I actually really loved that. I thought it was.
I loved it. I think
It was. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was gonna say, knowing people who work in visual effects, I know that took a village to make that scene happen. And when we remember this is a TV show, this isn't a film. The fact that they could pull off something like that, which we've seen in movies before, that doesn't even look half as good, I was blown away by it, and it really was genuinely terrifying, to see that water crashing through the walls and this sort of slow impending doom as she stood there. I thought it was beautiful. I thought the tension in that scene was great. So I would give that a 10 out of 10. That opening was amazing.
And that came about by her interactions with her father, which we'll get to later through the episode. But the way that they introduced that was through the Palantir. And so in the books, her father is Tar Palantir. So his kind of whole deal is that he kind of has this ability to see the future and to see, not just see the future, but he has great eyesight as well, we're told. And so he is like the king who's the far seer, which is what the word means, kind of. And so in the books, the prophecy that he makes is that the line of Elros will end when the tree is cut down.
Right.
And so the tree is still there in the dream sequence. I rationalize that as that being a dream, and so it's kind of it's imagery of a dream, rather than it being kind of the exact representation of what will happen. It's more of a metaphor, although we know the wave is coming. But
it's coming. Yeah.
But the tree was still there. And instead they kind of used the tree as a metaphor for the kind of the tears of the Valar, which I think works really well for them dramatically, but is a little bit of a departure from the books too. But it's an example of something which is thematically kind of true to Tolkien.
Totally.
And the story that he was telling, but it is just kind of like a different visual hook that they had.
I do love they've tied in a lot of that. There's a moment with Arondir in episode 3 with the tree, which I think we've all learned now, if you've seen on Twitter, that was improvised actually in his audition, and then he used it in the actual scene, and they kept that and gave him that beautiful line in Quenya, which I love because as we all know, the professor, that was his great love, other than his wife, in languages, was trees and the forest and nature and beauty. And I feel like that's when I was a child reading these books. That was my connection to them too, was that I grew up in a town that was surrounded by beautiful mountains and forests and all these places you could go to. The redwoods were just like 10 minutes away. And so I grew up just running through woods and forests. And so I've always felt that connection to the books because of that. And also to him, to the professor, for that. And I'm glad that the show has kept that little theme alive in the show whenever they can.
Yeah, that was nice. And so let's move on a little bit from the dream. She wakes up and she gets kind of called to court, and then we cut to the scene that you dislike, most of us dislike, with the guy complaining, the guy that Halbrand beat the crap out of in the last episode.
Loved that, by the way. That was so nice. That was a great little moment.
So he gets discharged from hospital and immediately goes on a rampage, pretty much.
Right. He's angry, yeah.
And we get introduced to Kemen as well, the son of Falrazon, future Nazgul, in my opinion.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I love that theory.
Well, because we don't know this character from the books, so it would kind of make sense for him to be a character that history has forgotten.
Yeah. He feels to me, he's given me like kind of not I won't use the word sleazy because I don't think he is. I think he's just he's the son of a politician. But yeah, he's a little he's like a sleazy Faramir in my opinion, and his relationship that he's going after Isildur's sister. Why am I blanking on her name right now? And
Eärien,
Emma's character. It feels a bit like she's got a little fire in her too, much like Eowyn, and I like that. I like that they were kind of seeing the mirror of that, but we're seeing a different version. What if Faramir was not so savory, you know what I mean, and was because he's not to say that Kemen is a disappointment to his father, but we're getting that his father has very high expectations for him, and maybe he's not living up to them and feels a little bit of that, and so I wonder if we're going to get some parallels there. Sorry if that was all over the place.
No, it's good. He's also setting up divisions in Elendil's family as well by romancing his daughter and being one of the king's men, presumably. Being in a different camp, there's going to be kind of some conflict that's being set up there in the future. But we're only getting little bits of this at the moment. They're laying groundwork this season for future drama, I'd imagine.
Totally.
But yeah, I did get a little bit of a sleazy vibe from him. I thought he was just a bit too smooth with the.
Yeah, he is.
I even wonder
performance
whether.
Was great, but
it was good. Yeah, but they're bumping into her and having a drink spilled on his tunic. I wonder whether he does that with all the girls.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's gotta be his move.
Everybody's drinking on this island anyway, so
he's got his spilling tunic that he wears on days like this. When I meet girls, my meet cute shirt that I wear. For people in chat who don't know what a meet cute is, you can Google it. It's a movie term.
Yeah. All right. So and then we cut to the scene with Galadriel and Miriel and Elendil, and they're discussing Halbrand and what to do with him.
Right.
And she says, I believe that he is the lost heir in exile to the kingdom of the Southlands, and Miriel's not having it. Basically, she can't go there. Basically, politically, that's how she feels. And Elendil tries to crack a joke, which doesn't come off, which was intriguing because Elendil is kind of he wasn't the Lord of Andúnier because his father Amandil, who we haven't got in the show, was the last Lord of Andúnier, and they seem to have just kind of either not got the rights to tell those stories or just decided to just kind of leave that detail out.
Yeah, it feels like a combination of the two, a rights thing, and maybe if they did, they might be like, look, this is too much. How do we do this without making it super expository and the way he delivers the line?
Yeah, so they've kind of streamlined that to him being a descendant of a noble line. It's more of a noble line. He's part of the line of Elros. Like
right. Yep. And direct, isn't he?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, if Silmarien, his ancestor, was if they'd changed the rule of succession at that point already, or already had a different line of succession before that, then she would have been the first ruling queen, and that would have been the ruling line.
Right.
So history would have been completely different. But it's just a case of, as you say, it's kind of losing that exposition, not needing to tell the whole story, and just also kind of probably the rights. But
yeah, just a tricky one.
But it's quite excuse me, quite a difficult kind of scene dramatically to pull off. With Galadriel being so set in her ways and Miriel being the same but has sort of issues around like her political freedom to be able to make the decisions that Galadriel is pressuring her into. Galadriel doesn't seem to understand that she doesn't have any leverage yet. And Halbrand is going to point that out to her as soon as she gets banged up in jail.
Right. Which is immediately after this, which I will say editorially, the show has been good. These last 2 episodes specifically, the editing has been lovely for jokes landing pretty well for the audience, maybe not for other characters, but landing really well. And then I liked the gag of her being all angry and then boom, next shot, see that jail cell close on her, and you're just like, you know, and Halbrand's little moment of like, oh hey, what'd you do this time?
Yeah, he does have a kind of cheeky laugh at her expense, doesn't he? And it's just, I did chuckle at it too, or smirk or something. I had a humor response, but it wasn't a good look for Galadriel, I didn't think.
No, it definitely, and that's the thing. You know, a lot of these episodes have been humbling for her to see that, you know, you're not in Lindon, you're not in Middle Earth, you don't really have any authority here, and I don't think she's used to that. She's like, I'm commander of the Northern Armies. You know, she's from the Golden House, like that means something to other people, but here it doesn't, and she's literally a fish out of water, you know, kind of thing. And so, especially after all that swimming, I'm sure she's got gills now. But yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate, you know, a bit of the you know, she's still young and she's a little naive, and so again, I know for everyone in the audience, we know Galadriel from the books as being this wise and sort of little different temperament, you know, whereas we're getting a different one. This is the younger, fierier, and I think as long as they keep on this line and don't go too far over it, I'm fine with that. But yeah, I think I know what you're about to say, which is that Halbrand having to point out to her a very obvious tactic, which was that, you know, she didn't get a reaction out of her until you brought up her dad. So there's that weak point, and Galadriel being like, "Oh yeah, you're right," was a little on the nose. Yeah.
Well, yeah. We got Fellowship in the fans in the chat.
Oh hey.
Hi Harry, good to see you.
How's it going, Harry? 2 streams in 1 week, Harry. I'm on fire.
We were both at the premiere on Harry's ticket, so big shout out to him for
the legend, the man, the myth, the legend, Harry.
Anyway, so we then, what's the next scene? We get to Isildur. We cut to Isildur on the boat, daydreaming again, which is a little bit of a kind of deja vu kind of feeling with him on the boat there again.
I hope they shot that scene the same days they shot the other one for budget reasons. We're all here, let's just get it.
Yeah, right. Same costumes, same setting.
Totally.
So you would think, you would hope.
Yeah.
What do you think he is daydreaming about, and what do you think is that voice that's calling out to him? Because that is one of the mysteries that is not being discussed enough.
I know that Emma said on Reddit that Isildur's mother drowned while trying to save him. I wonder if we're hearing her voice calling him, but I think it's, you know, that one could say it's a metaphor for destiny. You know, his destiny is to go to Middle Earth. It's going to happen, and I think that he is a dreamer. You know, he wants more. He wants more. It's like he's our Disney princess. You know, he's in this family. Things are good. He really should have nothing to complain about, but he's just like, I want more. I want to go. You know, I want to go where the Harfoots are. He goes out there, but you know, he wants to go. He wants to go to Middle Earth. He feels like that's his calling. So I feel like that's what we're seeing there is the, you know, for lack of a better term, the call of destiny.
Well, he wants to go west. He keeps talking about going to the west, or the true Numenor, and to go west. And I'm not quite sure what that means, other than perhaps the Andustar and Andunier.
Right.
So that would be, you know, their homelands, which presumably they've had to abandon, just as they did in the books. They moved and relocated to the port city on the east coast, which they've kind of, I think they've blended 2 of the cities into one. So there's just Armenalos. So there is no Romena.
Oh, okay. So my bad. So when he's looking at that, he's not looking towards Middle Earth. He's looking west.
I
We're
think
seeing those
because they keep talking about him following the same path as his brother, and his
Got
brother
it. Got it.
has done something to go west. I think I assume that means in the west of the island, and to potentially
Got it. My bad. I
rebuild their homeland.
didn't know if they had rights to talk about that stuff, and I knew they'd allude to it, but I didn't know if that's all the
Well,
same thing. That's nice at least.
I'm not sure either, because I mean, obviously he ends up going the opposite direction at the end of the episode, but
Right.
um, but that was a decent setup for that.
Mhm.
We're getting some. I'm just catching up with the chat here. We're getting some
Mhm.
comments about the Palantiri.
Yeah.
Brief Mortal
Periods.
11 kicked off this conversation. Says a question about the Palantiri. I seem to recall that the Numenorians had several of them. So Miriel is going to claim that this is the Palantir that she has is the only one that she knows of, but there were
Mhm.
6 other that were lost or hidden. And my money's on hidden because, or I mean, at least they're going to be found if they are lost, because we know from the books, and I assume they're going to tell this story, that Elendil is going to rescue the 7 Palantiri and install them in various locations in Gondor and Arnor.
Mhm.
So yeah, there are 7, as Alison points out, and yeah, there was 9 ships of the exiles of Elendil's faithful that sail to Middle Earth, and
Mhm.
7 stones. The books tell us that he rescued various books and scrolls of lore as well. So,
Mhm.
so that's the answer to that. Maybe we should talk about that scene as well, the Palantir scene. We've already mentioned it, but
Yeah. I loved the visual effect of it, like the ice cracking little thing. I thought was very cool.
Mhm.
Especially because we've seen it depicted on film before in a different way. I kind of preferred this one a little bit. Um, I
It
think it's
felt a bit
interesting.
more. It felt a bit more mystical.
Yeah, more mystical, and also I thought it was interesting that it would have shown Galadriel the exact same vision. Because in my understanding, and someone in chat can correct me, or you can correct me, from the books, I always thought that the stones would show you something specific to you, and not always the same vision. To Does that make sense? Like, if
Hmm.
I touch it versus you touch it, you may see something different than I do, or maybe I'm just combining that with
Well,
the mirror of Galadriel.
it's. I mean, they're similar phenomena, but
Mhm.
the books inform us that they can only show things that are real,
Right.
which does contradict this idea of the dream sequence at the beginning being kind of metaphorical, because Galadriel sees almost the exact same thing,
Totally.
which is peculiar a little, but that might be a change. But the Silmarillion, actually, the last book of the Silmarillion, the of the Rings of Power and the Third Age, tells us that they can see in time and space. So the idea of the Palantiri possibly providing visions of the future or of the past is not without kind of textual support.
Hmm.
So I kind of liked that they tied the Palantir in with that. But it's kind of an intriguing way of getting that visual on screen, and I liked it as a scene, like dramatically and cinematically.
Loved it. Yeah.
Oh.
I was into that.
And we see some other relics as well in that scene as well.
We see some very familiar looking relics in that scene.
Yeah. So what
I'm
do we
sure
see, Chase?
I saw a sword that looked an awful lot like Narsil,
Yeah.
but it looked gold actually, which was interesting.
Mm.
But in terms of
Very similar design though.
very sim-
Same kind of pommel and crossguard.
and was that Tuor's or Turin? No, why am I blanking on his name?
Two Oars Swan Shield, yeah, from the
Correct.
Silmarillion.
So saw that, which I thought was pretty cool. Um,
And
uh,
potentially Dramble Leg as well, which was also Two Oars.
mhm. And so that
The
was neat.
axe.
I like these little lore nods that we're getting. I know some people are like, oh, they're just cheap Easter eggs to keep us
Mm.
fans, from rioting.
But
But
they
I think
are, really. I mean,
they totally are. But they're done at least in a nice way. It's not like we walked by and they had little placards that had the names on them. Like they're really trying to stick in there. It was like, hey, look, it's in the background. And the thing is, from a film background, they just as easily could have not done that. They could have saved
mm,
themselves a good chunk of change and not gone through the trouble of doing that, but they did it, and I think that's a nice a nice thing to go and do.
And the
So,
fan service of people who are Tolkien fans who know what Dramble Leg is like it's a small percentage
very small.
of
So it's like
hardcore Tolkien fans.
right. Uh, so for cheap Easter eggs that cause more than most of us making them up. Yeah, that's true. Reflecting, rambling. You were totally right. That I'm sure the cost, the R&D alone that went into making the shield and stuff like that, and the 3D scanning and whatever it was, probably could have paid my rent for 6 months. But man, did it look good for that 0.3 seconds on screen.
Alison is pointing out that there was a painting of what looked like potentially Luthien there as well in that scene.
Yeah. Someone had mentioned that, and I didn't actually. I have to go back and rewatch the episode to see that.
Yeah, me
But
too.
I
It
love.
goes by very fast, but
Yeah, we also got Luthien in the carving the trees with
Huan, yeah.
Huor, yeah, which was for me huge because big fan of Orome of the Valar, and so seeing his hound was very cool.
But anyway, the next scene after the scene on the boat with Isildur was we go back to Arondir and we finally meet the father of the Orcs. Which, what's your theory about him? Because there seems to be one prevailing theory about him that makes the most sense.
Maybe it's because I voiced him in the thing, but I really would love for him to be Maglin. But I heard people saying Maglor is an option as well, but I don't think they would, unless Elrond at some point in this show mentions a foster parent or someone who took him in after his parents were gone. And correct me if I'm wrong. This has been so long since I read the Silmarillion. I tend to try to go back to it every year, but if I remember correctly, Maglor did find Elrond and Elros, right, and made the argument not to harm them, right, and kind of took them in for a time. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, he kind of adopts them for a few years, and then later on he goes after the last Silmaril, and they get the last two Silmarils. He and Maedhros actually do manage to capture them without too much of a fight, because Eonwe says to them, "Let them go." And Maglor actually throws his into the ocean.
Right.
And then he goes missing after that. So he doesn't die, but it's kind of implied that he haunts the spirit of the coast and becomes this kind of like formless kind of spirit.
Which I like, and I think his armor has some interesting things. It looks like a winding river down there, which he talked about growing up near the river in Beleriand. Yeah. And but my issue with that is, unless Elrond at some point mentions having a foster parent or someone who took him in before we reveal who Adar is, like, it just won't have any impact. It would be more powerful to be like, oh, I had this other, caregiver at some point, that was sort of my other father for a time, and and then to have that reveal, then it has some dramatic weight to it. Otherwise, unless it's you and me, no one else sitting at home is going to be like, who cares who this guy is? Whereas Maglin, you can get away with it because he's not connected to Elrond or anyone else, but his history is enough there where it's a nice nod to fans to be like, oh yeah, but like, I'm pretty sure he died. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think he survived the fall in anybody's.
I mean, look, those elves, they're like cats. They just chuck them off a roof, they'll be fine. No, yeah, it would be a tough thing to say he was brought back. I just thought of the fact that he's one of the few people that was captured by Morgoth and lived to tell about it. That maybe, and Morgoth obviously promised him all kinds of nice things that he never lived up to. So I was like, okay, I could be into that, but right now I'm leaning towards original character. That's for me. That makes sense.
I think he's a proto-orc, basically. I think he was one of the first elves that was not necessarily one of the first generation of elves, but one of the early elves who was corrupted by Melkor and was tortured and corrupted and turned to evil. He has some interesting lines. He says, "You have been told many lies, and
yeah, I love that.
The lies are so deep that even the roots and the stones believe them." And you'd have
which is a very Maglor thing to say. He was a poet. It's very poetic.
It's a very elvish thing to say.
Mhm.
I would hate it if it was Maglor, honestly, like in
Yeah.
particular. I mean, Maiglin would be more law breaking because
Mhm.
Maiglin is dead, but
Yeah.
but Maglor, I like his well, I don't like it, but his tragic end is the end of his story for me.
Mhm.
And he was the son of Feanor who came closest to rejecting the oath and returning to the faith of the Valar, and that he didn't in the end, and came to a bad end is like that's his tragic story
Yeah. Yeah.
over.
It would cheapen
Um,
that to have him just come back again. I agree.
so I think he's like a proto orc / corrupted elf from
Mhm.
from the days of the trees, and I think that's where they're going with it. Also, there's kind of evidence of that outside of the show because the OneRing.net leaked a long time ago that there were scenes that were shot showing the corruption of the orcs
Mhm.
um, and the creation of the orcs. And so
Mhm.
I think that's where they're going. I think we'll get flashbacks of that process, which would be horrifying to see on screen.
Yeah.
But they reported that that was the explanation for some of the nudity that was reported in the show. Um,
Yeah.
so
I remember those days.
I don't know. Yeah, me too. I don't know whether I trust that report, but I think maybe there's probably some fire where there is smoke, and maybe they did shoot scenes like that, and maybe that's where they're going with that character.
Mhm.
And I think that would be a lot more interesting to explore than have Maglor show up from the dead,
Totally. I don't think it.
Maiglin,
Yeah, I don't think it.
or
I don't think it
Aeol,
needs
or
a.
anybody.
Yeah, or any of the many people they could
Mm,
pull from. I like the idea of him just being the one of the first that were tortured. Now, my question for you is because this is what's on my mind is that he seems pretty ambitious. He seems like he's got
mm,
some goals. He makes some allusions to not being a god yet.
mm. Right.
Um, and do we think that sword that he's looking for, the hilt, as they refer to it, do you think that's the key
Mm.
to making him what he thinks will make him a god?
Well, I think that he is serving Sauron, but I think he has aspirations above his station to potentially rival Sauron in the future.
God, okay, so you do think
That
he's working with Sauron, not on his own.
officially, but I think that they
Hmm.
might lead us towards a kind of. I said this actually last night on another
Hmm.
stream. They might lead us towards a kind of like Sith rule of two type scenario where the student
Ah, I like that.
wants to overtake the
That's cool. I'm into
master
that.
and challenge him, and I think that will probably be the end of him because I think Sauron will stomp him. Honestly,
Yeah.
that's where I would go if I was writing it. So that's kind of where that theory
Yeah,
comes
yeah.
from, rather than any evidence. As for the sword, I mean, that's later on in the episode, of course. But
Hmm.
the sword comes up in this episode. We learned a little bit about it last episode, just from the
Totally.
fact that we learned what the sigil of Sauron was. That it's
Hmm.
actually it's kind of a symbol of the backup plan to create a realm of evil in the Southlands, which we're calling Before Door, because we know what happens down there. And so, you guys in the chat, have you still got Chase? He's frozen on my screen.
For me, are we back?
Oh, I got a few seconds of him there.
Nope. And we're back. Can you see me and hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, you're
Sorry
back.
about that. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. It might have been my end, something happening.
Yeah, yeah. No worries. Yeah, so the sigil of Sauron, the mark of Sauron, is obviously representative of the plan to convert the Southlands into a realm of evil, into Mordor, and so I think that sword is crucial to that plan.
Correct.
And I think it will be involved in some kind of dark ritual to make Mount Doom explode. That's my
I
theory.
also agree that. I think that is whether that's intentional when they're using the sword or if that's just a aftermath
Mm,
of something going awry with the using that sword as a key or for this ritual. I think it's going to happen.
yeah. So you're frozen again for me at the moment.
Ooh,
Oh, I think you're catching up
I'm back.
again. Yeah, you're back
There we
again.
go. Okay, sorry. So weird. It's funny. I'm hooked to Ethernet and everything.
Uh-huh.
Checking my download speed. 200. So 260 megabits. We'll see what's going on. But yeah, sorry. Continue. Yeah. What is that?
Council of the Rings is commenting on Halbrand's sigil, which looks a lot like a radish with wings.
From the Radish lands, right?
I can't make out what that is, but yeah, it's a strange one.
Yeah, someone talked about it being a bird diving, which I thought was interesting. Once you when someone suggests something, it's like now you can't unsee it, but it does kind of look like a top-down view of a bird who is tucked its wings and going in for a dive bomb. But that's who knows what that thing is.
That could make sense. Yeah. I'm still having problems with your connection a little.
Oh man! All right, let me see something real quick. Maybe it is too many things running in the background. Let's exit all these. Or knowing my luck, it's LA. Someone's probably working on our internet outside.
So another piece of information that we got as well was about Arondir and the fact that he is from Beleriand. And so the thing with him is, like, he was advertised as a Sylvan elf, which
correct.
I would imagine they've gone for Sylvan rather than Nandor or something from the Silmarillion because they don't have rights again, would be my assumption. So, but it seems to be that he was in Beleriand, so he was there during the Great War, the War of the Jewels, and he was present for those events. I think your picture is clearing up a little bit now.
Oh, here we go. I'm actually just lowering the resolution. Maybe that will help smoothen out some of this.
Yeah,
or make it worse. Cool.
All right. So, yeah, I'm just catching up with the comments here as well.
Totally.
The Droob says, I love Tolkien's Legendarium. I absolutely do not care about loyalty to Tolkien's vision or whatever. So that's kind of an interesting take, but it's people vary on this a lot, of course. Some people talk about death of the author, and this is an interesting conversation to have because people often conflate the idea of death of the author with people just arguing that the author is dead, which is just a fact, and that we can't know what the intention was because we can't ask Tolkien. Of course, he was very clear about lots of things and unclear about others. And so, yeah, it's the ongoing, discourse with this show at the moment. Let's see what else we've got here. Troy says, the Southlanders, what social should we choose? The king. Let's just wing it.
There you go.
Very good
pun.
Yeah, I think I'm caught up with the chat. Let's move on to the next scene. Let me just check on that. So we cut back to the tower. Adar sort of promises to free Arondir, and he says take a message to the men sheltering in the tower, and he gives them a message, and he says. We learn later on that he says, clear out or I'm coming for you, essentially.
Right. Swear fealty to me or get wrecked.
And Bronwyn's trying to organize their defense and try to find food for them, and they've run out of food. I don't know why they didn't take more food with them. That was my question. It seems a little bit illogical for them to just kind of... You are back at the moment.
There we go. It's just sorry, this is so weird. This is the first time internet's ever been an issue here. Again, this is another situation of like, I guess, when writing has to serve the plot kind of thing. Also that shot of everyone there when she's like, oh, there's just too many people, we're not gonna have room.
Oh, I think we've completely lost Chase now. Okay, I will carry on, and we will just interact directly with the chat. So if you're watching, hopefully we can get Chase back in a moment. Oh, there he is.
Okay.
Hello, man.
This is the real conflict of the show. Is my bad internet. This is my internet Sauron. So if you guys want, sorry, spoiler alert, it's my internet.
I'll tell you what, it's coming up to an hour now anyway. So
I do have
you
to.
said that. You said that
do
you
have
had
to
to
run.
run. So,
Mhm.
yeah, thank you for coming on short
Of
notice.
course. No, thank you for having me.
Potentially, we can have you on again in the future.
That'd be great.
We are kind of like planning to do some content of a different nature in the future. So you might be seeing Chase's face again in the future.
Sorry about that. But yeah, if you guys will have me back, I would love to come back. It was awesome.
Yeah. All right. Where can people find you online if they want to, or what are you working on? If you can talk about anything.
Yeah.
Chase is an actor, by the way, in case we hadn't said.
Yeah.
So
You can find me at Chase MM18 on Instagram, and I guess you think that's my handle just about everywhere. I think that's mine on Twitter as well. If not, it's either Chase M Mullins or that. In terms of things I have out, Brute Force just got released on streaming, so that's everywhere. Or you can rent it on Amazon. I did a terrible Lifetime movie. If you're here in America, you know what that is. And I'm sorry, please don't watch it. And I'm trying to think of anything else that's coming up. Or you can go back and look at some of your amazing Silmarillion episodes. And the episode about Eol and Myglin features my voice.
yeah, smashed it. Chapter
yeah,
16 is
thank
one of my
you.
favorite chapters that I've covered, and it's largely thanks to your contribution.
Oh, thank you. No, I was so honored to be. Honestly, anyone who will let me put on an English accent and talk like an elf, and anyone who will sit here for an hour and talk to me about Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, that makes me so happy because I think my wife is sick of it. So I appreciate that.
Actually, on the subject of the Silmarillion series, I had some questions at the beginning here. I'm just going to try and scroll back up and just highlight those if I can. Some people are asking about that. Ginger Bearded Geek says, when is Silmarillion Explained making a comeback? I did make an announcement about this a little while ago, but I guess not everybody saw. Yeah, it's on hiatus for the time being, but I am kind of working on it behind the scenes. And actually, just today, I've hopefully cast, or just in the last 2 days, I've hopefully cast roles for Baron and Luthien.
Oh,
so
nice.
that is the chapter that I'm up to. I'll tell you another time who I've got for that because you know them too.
Nice. I'm excited for that.
But you might be able to guess it. But
I think so. Does it start with a G? For Baron?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Yeah, that's great. He'll be perfect with
that. So yeah, we'll hopefully have that when Rings of Power finishes, because this covering this show and keeping up with other lore content at the same time is obviously taking up a fair bit of time. For those of you that really, really despise this show and want my Silmarillion series back, I apologize, but it is coming. It will come back. Tufik Flyful also asked the same question. I was just listening to your playlist of Silmarillion. Yes, it will be coming back probably towards the end of October/November. I would guess probably October, because I'm working on the writing and I'm casting, and I'll probably get a lot of the vocals done beforehand, so that will speed things up once it does come back. So yeah, I do expect more videos, and perhaps we'll have more of Chase in the future as well. Who knows?
I would love that. And reflective rambling, thank you so much. That you have no idea. That means the world to me. So thank you so much.
Cool. All right. I'll speak to you soon, Chase. You've got to run, so we'll catch you again another time. Take care.
Thank you guys so much. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Cheers, mate. Bye. Alrighty. So I think, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to respond to questions about the episode for the next half an hour to an hour, however long we have questions and content to respond to. I was going to go through the whole episode, but we haven't gotten very far yet, and I don't want to be here all night. But yeah, it's just, if anybody has any lore questions about anything that we've seen in the show, or anything that might be coming up, or wants to share your theories, I'm here to talk for however long you'll have me. Varlock says, weird today. I randomly got recommended my YouTube for your video on Rise of Myglin, which you did a while back. The algorithm works in weird ways. Yeah, maybe people are talking about Myglin at the moment. Council of the Rings says, any theories about the child being called Eilinel? Just like Aldarion's sister, or maybe a vague reference to Eilinel? Sauron tricked Gorlim with a phantom of Eilinel to make him betray Barahir. Okay, so this is a little deep cut here. The child being called Eilinel, I'm not sure who you mean. I might have missed something. I'm going to Google that. Perhaps you can expound on that yourself. But yeah, that was the kind of like the almost like the prologue sequence to the Baron and Luthien story, which is, oh, that's the child in the dream. Okay. I don't know. I think maybe that was just a kind of I guess it was just an Elvish name that they used for that child. I didn't catch that. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, I'll have to rewatch that now. But I think it's just a vague reference to other Elvish names. They've probably kind of come up with an Elvish sort of somebody in their law department, one of the scholars that they have working for them, has probably recommended that name or suggested that name, and I don't imagine it has any extra significance, but I'd have to rewatch that. That's interesting, though. I didn't even catch that the baby had a name. Cool. All right. Troy asks, what are your thoughts on the various Eärendil references we've had thus far? That is, do you enjoy those lore references? Yeah, I would say I enjoy them. I think I would like to see more of that, just to explain it a little more. And what I would like to see is the half elven and the choice of Elros and Elrond to be properly explained, because what is particularly important to the events of the Second Age is the idea of mortality and the choices that the various groups make, especially the Númenóreans, but also the elves, because it's important to the elves. Kind of the whole Rings of Power project is about preserving the mortal world to be more in sync with the immortal elves. And so it's an important theme in the Second Age for various reasons. And so to explain the choice of the half-elven will kind of set that up in a way that they've not attempted to do at the moment. I think we'll get more Eärendil references. I think it's inevitable. Presumably they have the rights to that, because Eärendil's story is referenced in the Lord of the Rings and it's kind of explained. Bilbo sings a song about it. And so I expect to get more. I don't expect to get a flashback because they don't have the rights for that, presumably. But yeah, I've enjoyed those references because I love Eärendil. But yeah, it's kind of Easter eggy at the moment. Council of the Rings asks, do you think we heard the Balrog when the mineshaft collapsed? There's a rumor about it being unleashed in episode 7. I haven't heard that. If they release the Balrog that early, I'll be annoyed, and I'll be making videos that are as critical as yours are, my friend. I would be bothered by the Balrog showing up early. I would be bothered by the Balrog, by Durin's Bane showing up at all, because it's too early lore-wise for that to happen. However, I think it probably will happen. I think that's where they'll lead us to, with the fact that they've just discovered Mithril. Even though in the lore we know that Mithril was around in the First Age. Yes, so yeah, the Balrog was in the trailer. That's true. There's another theory about the Balrog, which is Meteor Man could be a Balrog in humanoid form for some reason, which I'm leaning that way, potentially, maybe, although I have various conflicting theories about him. They're setting that up as a mystery box to be unsolvable at the moment. Some people are insisting it's Gandalf, and I'm not, necessarily convinced of that at the moment. But yeah, I mean, the Balrog was in the trailer. When I saw it in the trailer, I thought that it was probably just going to be a First Age flashback. But I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to see. APNPL says, do you think Gil-galad only sent Elrond to assist Celebrimbor because the latter wanted some sort of access to the Mithril the dwarves have found? Yeah, we'll probably find out next episode. We've got Durin heading to Lindon. We're going to get more Gil-galad, and we were told, I think, at some point in part of the kind of marketing material that the showrunners have been doing, some of the interviews that they've done, that Celebrimbor's role will increase in the second half of the season. And so I expect to see a lot more of him and more of his plans being made clearer. Certainly one of the elven rings will be made out of mithril, and I think that nugget of mithril that Durin gives to Elrond in the latest episode will become Nenya, basically, which is the ring of adamant that is given to Galadriel later on. So that is a mithril ring. So I think if he doesn't already have it in mind to use mithril for that, he will do very soon. Do you think we will see Glorfindel in the show? Not this season. I certainly would like to. I think he was a character that was was done dirty by the movies. Excuse me. Just gonna grab some water here. I mean, if they want to do fan service and they want to give the Tolkien fans something to get excited about, I think Glorfindel's inclusion in the show would be advisable, and I think it would be a nice piece of not just fan service, but a rewarding use of a canon character. So I probably think that we will see him at some point, and I think that we will see him at least in the War of Last Alliance. It would be kind of a mistake not to at least have a cameo for him. And so I'd like to see that character, yes. Whether or not they'll do anything dramatic with him is another question, but I think it's a character that we'll probably see at some point. Refracted Rambling says, I think so, Alison. I just question if it's Celebrimbor or Gil-galad that can't be trusted. Well, I don't like the idea of a Gil-galad that can't be trusted. Celebrimbor, yes, he could be scheming, he could be plotting, he could be planning things. He seems a bit too grandfatherly and cheerful at the moment to be a Feanorian. But he was one of the better of the Feanorians. But yeah, I mean, King Durin III, seems to know that there's more going on than they've been told, and I would agree with him. He says, what's the line about tonic? I've forgotten. But yeah, he seems to smell a rat somewhere, and he's sending his son off to investigate. And I think his son is going to find things out. Did it bother you that Elrond so willingly swore an oath? It bothered me in the sense that I thought to myself, anytime that an oath is sworn in Tolkien, it's a red flag, really. So it's I don't know whether we'll see him break the oath, but I mean, I think about Lord of the Rings Elrond, right? And when he sends the Fellowship off after the Council of Elrond, he chooses companions to go with Frodo, and he chooses 9 companions, and he says to them before they set out, he says, no oath or bond is laid upon you to go further than you will. And it's because he knows that swearing oaths is usually a recipe for disaster. And in the book canon, he knows that because of the events of the First Age. Of course, he knows all about oaths and what they can do and how destructive they can be. So yeah, it was a little jarring, and we'll have to wait and see what consequences there'll be for that. Some people have been suggesting that oath might explain some of the tragedy that is going to be coming up in his storyline later on. Be interesting to see how they handle Celebrian when they get there. Just catching up the chat here. Who are my top 3 favorite characters in the show so far? Maybe a top 3 worst as well. Top 3. I'm going to go in no particular order. I think Elrond and Durin have been fabulous on the whole. Just their whole character dynamic has actually worked dramatically and has really endeared them to the audience thus far. and probably Elendil, I would say. I think his actor seems to get the character. He certainly, based on the interview that Matt did from Nerd of the Rings recently, he seems to have a good understanding of the books and has done his research, and so I think people seem to be responding to his performance. So I'd like those three. The worst characters, I don't want to do that to the actors at the moment. Not that they watch this channel, but I mean, I think you can probably guess. I already said Gil-galad I haven't enjoyed, and Galadriel I've had some issues with. Although it's not the performances so much as the writing. But we'll leave it there because I don't want to get into it. Do I think that Iarion might be designing Minas Tirith in a later season now that she's becoming an architect? I think, yeah, we're heading in the direction of her working on the kind of upcoming monuments and buildings that are going to be famous. I think Temple of Sauron, honestly. I think her new boyfriend is going to lead her astray, and I think she's going to be building the Temple of Sauron. That would be my guess. Because they're setting up a conflict there in Elendil's storyline, and that's kind of clear that she's going to come to blows with her father as things develop, and her brothers. Alison says, I got a little nauseated when Elrond made an oath. Yeah, maybe that was the intended effect. Yeah, it was. I liked that scene because it was touching, but then I did also go, oh no, don't do it, because oaths never turn out well. Varlock says, the scene between Durin and his father Durin was great. What do you think of having two Durins living simultaneously? The showrunners have said it will be explained, but I can't figure out how. Oh, have they said that? Because that's intriguing. I was disappointed when I heard that there would be two Durins existing simultaneously. As I've said in previous live streams before, and as some of you all know, part of the lore of the elves is that the line of Durin, every Durin who is born is a reincarnation of the original Durin the Deathless, and so that was kind of quite an important part of Dwarvish mythology. As so much as we know about Dwarvish mythology, which is to say we know a lot less about their perspective on things, but yeah, having two Durins at the same time is a little odd. I like the acting. I think both of the father has also been great. We got a little more of him at the end of this episode as well, and I really actually liked how he kind of forgave his son and dispatched him off to Lindon with a mission. So yeah, it was. I've got no issues with like the characterization or the acting or anything there. The Dwarvish plotline has been my favorite thus far. But yeah, having two Durins, I'd be curious to see how they explain that. Because I just assumed that it was an artifact of time compression and that they were just ignoring the Dwarvish lore. Yeah, just catching up on. What do you think they'll do with the Melkor priests in this season? According to a leak, they find the stranger in the next episode, I think. No clue what they will do with them afterwards. Yeah, so Meteor Man. Okay. So Stranger. The Stranger is yeah, I'm reforming my thoughts on him. I think the Stranger might be a sacrificial lamb. I think that sword is going to be used to kill the Stranger. I think it's a blood magic, evil enchanted sword that is going to be used to create a mystical event which will shatter the foundations of the earth and create the land of Mordor. And I think that's why the priests of Melkor are going to kidnap him. That's my theory. And that's spoiling probably an upcoming video because I'm going to be talking about that this week, I think. And so that, yeah, I made that that video about who is the stranger in the first week after the premiere and the first 2 episodes came out, and speculated that it could have been Sauron or Gandalf, and I now think that it's probably a Balrog, which is a bizarre storyline to be doing. It's very odd, but I think that it's probably the best explanation that I can come up with. There is the possibility that it's a blue wizard, and that could also be what they do still. That could also still be the storyline, that it's a blue wizard and they're going to sacrifice him instead. I don't know. The follow-up comment here. Council of the Rings says, very interesting theory. Haven't heard that one before. I thought the sword would Morgul wound Theo and he'd accept a ring to survive. It's possible. I think we're still a ways away from the rings being forged. So maybe. I don't know. Okay. Perhaps we're going to see the destruction of the Entwives. So Tolkien suggested at one point in a letter to, I think, one of his proofreaders or one of his sort of correspondents who was a fan who was kind of proofreading drafts to the Lord of the Rings, if I remember correctly. He suggested in writing that the Entwives were present in the land that later becomes known as the Brown Lands, and that Sauron adopted a scorched earth policy, as the quote goes, and burnt the lands of the Entwives, and that's what happened to the Entwives. So I would like to see that actually happen in the War of Last Alliance. I would like to see the Entwives before that, and I would like to see them tragically get burnt, which will probably horrify some people and please others. But it's I think we will see Ents, and I think we will see Entwives, because that's kind of part of the lore, and it'd be nice to see that play out, even though it won't be nice. It'll be really awful. Fimberthil burning and Treebeard weeping. Yes, well, Treebeard doesn't know what happened. He describes the Entwives as lost, and we cannot find them. So I don't think we'll see him physically see them burn. We'll see the Entwives separately than the Ents. But Alison says, I hope Arondir runs into the Entwives. He's already wearing their merch. Yeah, I guess. Okay. My mouth is a little dry, and I don't have a guest this week. I'm just gonna while I've got all of you watching, it's good audience this week, actually, almost 50 people. I think we had over 50 a little while ago. Next week, I will have quite a good panel on, hopefully. I've been reaching out to people all week this week, and a lot of my contacts have been busy. But next week, I should hopefully have a few big names on. So I'm hoping to have Varking Runesong, podcaster and kind of admin for the Lord of the Rings on Prime Reddit group. So a lot of you know him. He does content sometimes with Fellowship of Fans and the OneRing.net. So I'm hoping to have him on with Nerd of the Rings as well. And so Matt just agreed to come on earlier on today, and so we'll hopefully have him on. And potentially a friend of mine, Jeff LaSala, who probably a lot of you won't know, but he's kind of a cool guy who I met at Mythmoot recently, and he is a kind of a D&D creator and editor and writer. He writes about Lord of the Rings as well. So he hopefully will be coming on too. So it's pretty much one of the best panels I've ever had on the channel, if I get all of those guests on. So hopefully we'll see all of you next week for that. If you are new to Voice of Geekdom, please do subscribe. And AK, hi, nice to see you. AK Watch is a great channel. Alicia does streams about House of the Dragon and so on. So yeah, check out her channel. If sorry to just I was just preparing to wind up, AK, but it's good to see you. So yeah, I think I'm going to call it there. Unless there's any final questions, I think I'm going to say goodnight. Okay, going once, twice. Okay, I'll see hopefully all of you next week for episode 5, and as I say, we'll have a great panel on next week. All right, goodbye everybody.